And we're here live. We're here live. It's once again live at lunch. Bible study, Wednesdays at 9 Pacific Standard Time. It's lunch somewhere for somebody. And we're getting into it. Today, we're wrapping up our studies on stewardship. And we're simply looking at this, evaluating our own stewardship. You know, what does our stewardship story say? And how do we evaluate that? How do we evaluate our own stewardship and what that looks like and how to do it according to the Lord's instruction in the Gospels. And so we'll look at that real simply in just a moment. The title is the main question. How well have you managed what God has given to you? How well have you managed what God has given to you? We'll look at this from a financial perspective primarily today. But like I said, stewardship can extend into other things as a parent. How well have you managed and dealt with and, really put into work the blessing that God has given you as your children? As a business owner, how well have you managed what God has given you as an opportunity to create your own schedule, maximize profits, employ others, and impact the community? As a leader, how well have you managed those that God has given you? Remember Jesus, before going to the cross, he talked to the Father and said, "Hey, look, I've dealt with and shown the ones you've given to me. I've given them the information they need, and they can handle it." And so, take that into consideration. How well have you handled what God has placed under your care, what God has placed under your tutelage, what God has placed in your hands? And when you can manage and measure that, that says a lot about where you are as far as being on track with what God has for you and what God is trying to do through you. God bless. Hope that works for you. Hope that's good to you. And let's keep going. This is really going to tell us something here, right? When we start looking at this, this is a question that I want to put in the comments and really just keep this going in the background as we continue to talk about our stewardship. But I want this question to keep burning in the background. How does your faith, right? How does your faith influence your financial practices? How does your faith influence your financial practices? Think about it. How does your faith influence your financial practices? And we'll come back to that later on and see what that's all about. But it's about your faith and the influence that it has on what you do with your finances. And I've got to say, it can be difficult sometimes. It can be a struggle sometimes, but different ways, different times all come about, right? So we want to look at how well have you managed what God has given to you, all right? So this is the test. I'm going to put stuff in the comments about how you measure your finances, right? First, this is what you need to do, right? Go to your bank account online, look at it, and I say take your checking, your primary bank account, right? Look at that and see what has your spending been for the last 30, 60, you can even go 90 days, right? And from there, identify what your spending priorities have been, right? I don't say use credit cards, right? I know some people are credit card masters and credit card fans. They know how to uh, finagle the points and rewards, and that's a different mindset than what might be your day to day spending on groceries and things of that nature for most people. Most people won't fall into that category as far as um, credit card whiz. So look at your primary bank account, your checking account mainly, what you use to buy gas, what you use to shop at the store. Um, Use that and measure, okay, where are my spending priorities? Where's the greatest amount of my money going? Where am I most frequently spending money? Is it Panera Bread? You know, is it McDonald's, Costco? Where are you most frequently spending money? Where are you spending the most money? Right? So when you think about it, where do you spend the most money? Right? What are those big ticket items that pop up when you look at your ledger, when you look at your account statements? What are those big ticket items that pop up? Right? And then the other question is, where do you spend money most often or frequently? Right? This doesn't work if you're using a different account for, let's say, your Starbucks. Right? This doesn't work if you're using a different account for um, your gas or anything like that. But it does give you an idea of, okay, here's the frequent names popping up at my on my account. I remember one month because I had an assignment at a different location when I was doing different type of work, and that location was next to a Walmart and a taco shop, and I would get certain items from the taco shop for lunch, and then I'd get something at Walmart to wash it down, and I could see from the time I had that assignment to the time that that assignment ended, the frequency of me going to that taco shop and Walmart and saying, "Oh man, if I had known, you know, I could have looked at this a little differently and approached this a little differently." But I was myself spending not just too much money, but also too much time um, buying stuff that was outside of the home and not, preparing my own meal, right? And so even though I could gather little by little and make it increase, if I spend little by little and it drips out, that also is like a leaky faucet, and I can't control when that goes out. And so look at your spending priorities. Look at where you're spending money the most, right? And look at where you're spending money most frequently, right? Most often. Where are you doing that? And how that's coming about, right? And then here's the question: have you been spending more on dining out than doing good? Are you making more of a contribution to the profits for, Target and Walmart than you are for, giving to your church, supporting local needs, able to respond to the urgent needs that arise from disasters, wildfires, things of that nature? Where are you? Where are you spending your money? Where are your financial priorities? And if you haven't identified any, then by de facto, your spending itself will identify them. It goes without saying something is taking a priority unless you're just stacking up money and stacking up money. Um, Make sure that you're able to see where your money goes Another thing that is always helpful. Um, we talked about it here in a lot of different times, as far as using different things to help you get your um, your finances together. Like everybody needs that. Everybody can use that. Everybody needs a little help with that. And so one of the things that has been pretty good is looking at the app that Dave Ramsey has, which is Every Dollar, right? Every Dollar. That's a budget app from Dave Ramsey, Ramsey Solutions. Um, they may not give you the ultimate investment advice, but Dave definitely has some advice on saving, consumer spending, budgeting, that you know most people see as anchors. And so, while you're looking at your spending, begin to develop a budget to where you control where every dollar goes. Um, Hopefully, that's something you get started. ASAP is the end of the month. June is starting. So that's going to be Sunday. Will be beginning of June. And so let's see. Can you do that? Can you get that momentum going and get started and take it from there and build a budget? Build a budget and then use that to measure it and see where your money's going. So we're looking at it and we're saying, okay, you've seen where your financial priorities are, right? You've looked at your primary bank account and you're like, ooh, I thought I was paying it forward, but I've been paying Ross and TJ Maxx a little bit more than I expected. I thought I was giving back, and I've been doing a lot more going and Chick-fil-A and other places that I didn't expect for that to be where my priority is. Hey, and if you have financial priorities, financial goals, here's the question: have you been on target with those, or are you off track? And looking at your finances directly on the screen, taking note of it, and noting where things are going versus where you wanted them to go, will tell you, hey man, look, I need to tighten this up. I need to get this in order. I need to go a different route. Whatever it is, you'll see the signs because the signs are right there as you look at your bank account and you build a budget. Those are going to be the signs that give you the indication of, hey, I'm on track, I'm off track. Here's what I need to do. Boom. And so here's the question to ask yourself. How would you rate your own stewardship? Let's say A through F. How would you rate it? A through F, how would you rate your own stewardship? What does it look like? Are you hitting the C plus? Hitting the B minus? What is it? What is it that you're doing with your money, with your time, with your talent, with your treasure, right? What are you doing with the things that God has given you? And where is that? I would say flipping from finances and going into part of, exercising God giving you a vision. Well, one of the things I I made a mistake on was I was gauging and judging myself too early in the journey when I was talking about measuring where I was with God giving me a vision, and I rated myself too early. I was grading myself too early. I was putting myself, basically putting myself down about, hey man, you haven't done what you're supposed to do with what God gave you. But then I also didn't realize that God was still working on some things to put me on a final path of preparation for that. And you can't rush God's preparation. You can't um, fast track that. if I can say that, you can't fast track God's preparation to set you up and put you in a position of preparation to be ready to handle where He sends you and what He sends you to do. And I think in my own mistakenness, I say, well, I'm gonna have to give myself a C minus for um, I wrote it out well, I've outlined it well. I just haven't executed it as I believe God has given for me to do, and so I'm lagging on that. And it wasn't that I was lagging; I was still having a lot of learning to do. I still had a lot of experience to go through and see that in shepherding and leading, some things you can't supply people at a level that you want to if you're supposed to also be taking them into new areas. Sometimes you have to be at the forefront and take them into a new area from the helm, and then other times you need to be pulled back and be a little more strategic as you walk among the people and care for them, and you're in the midst of them. And then sometimes you need to be in the background and take a look and see, okay, who's actually following what I'm saying, and see their movement from a different panoramic view, and know, like, okay, as a leader, here's where I need to touch these folks, here's where I need to talk to these folks, and here's where I need to say, you know what, if they're really with us, they're going to come along. Otherwise, I'll be here when they're ready, but I'm not going to drag them and pull them. Those are the things that you have in that final preparation of God showing you different things, different um, aspects as a leader. And it's all individualistic. It's all individualized because it's, based upon what God has for you, not for anyone else. And so in following God's lead and enduring and taking in the lessons of that final preparation, which is going to get us into our next study session, um, I say what God took me through helped me raise that C minus to about a B plus, right? To where I didn't have to speak truth to power as much as I had to say, hey, um, how can I help? Hey, where might we fit in? Hey, um, we don't need a lot of recognition. We just want to, kind of ease in and be right there and be a partner to you. And so a lot of what I've had to build in preparation for the mobile ministry beyond the multimedia ministry has been tactical and strategic. And it's like saying, okay, Moses didn't just rush into Egypt, pack up everybody, and leave. You get it? Moses, with the idea of a journey to the promised land, didn't just go back to Egypt, pack up everybody, and just leave. There was some strategy and tactic that were applied in order to make this happen for Moses and the people to best succeed. And they struggled with God right there along with them. And they struggled, fighting against their own ignorance, fighting against their own stiff-necked stance. They struggled with the idea of, well, this guy, is he really the leader that's designated for us? And is this the God that we're supposed to be following? They did all of that and still struggled. So if that's the ministry that has God as a pillar and a strong tower in their midst, what's going to happen when you hit the streets with your little ministry? What's going to happen, right? How are you going to be able to withstand and endure and not fall apart when things start shaking and quaking in your little ministry? That's what that final preparation helps you with. The ability to endure and withstand and remain resilient and face what you have to face as you go forward. And so I would say my stewardship on that level went from a C- to a B+, in a matter of about 5 to 6 months, literally in a matter of about 5 to 6 months, and I took it. So going back to finances, right? When you rate your level of stewardship, right? When you rate your level of stewardship, keep that in mind as a mark, as a baseline and a mark for improvement as you go further and as you expand your financial goals. Because as you get more information, as you get further inspired, you may want to do other things than just save a little money or get out of debt. You may want to save more for retirement. You may want to save to build a business. You may want to, buy other property, whatever may be the case. But as you do that, begin to set goals and measure and monitor and rate yourself as you are going forward with those goals. And like we said before, are you on track? You can't know if you're on track if you don't have goals set up and designed to match with where you want to go. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. So that's how would you measure your own, how would you measure your own success? How would you measure your own struggles, right? If we're being honest, like I said, when we take this on and we're open about it and we're realistic about it, God will help us to see where sometimes we need to ask God for forgiveness. We need to ask God for a second chance. Right, Lord, I know you blessed me, but I mishandled that. Can you send me another blessing to where you can get the glory and honor from me doing this right? That's honorable. That's true. And Lord, forgive me. You've shown me another way. Help me. Put your hand of protection on me. Guide me. Lead me. Let your spirit be the one that directs me in how to handle what I mishandled previously. That makes a big difference when we're approaching stuff and looking at measuring and evaluating where we are with what God has done with us. Look at this. How do you think Jesus would rate your stewardship? You put a number on it. You've put something together with it. How do you think Jesus would rate your stewardship? What would the Lord say? He said, well, man, you spend that much at 7-Eleven? What would Jesus say about that? Man, is that would Jesus have you reevaluating? Is that job worth it if you're going there? You're spending X amount of money on gas to get there. You're only earning so much um, there. They're not willing to give you any budge on increase in hours or increase in pay. And so, is it worth it? Is it worthwhile? Right? I think one of the things we forget, right? I think one of the things we forget is Jesus said, count the cost. You count the cost. And if we're able to do that, right, and say, hey, look, in preparation for doing this doesn't even make sense for me as I count the cost because it's not working out, right? It doesn't fit. It doesn't measure up. So we need to count the costs, right? And prior to jumping in and getting all caught up in the business of doing it or not, we need to do that prior to saying, hey, man, I'm going to keep on doing this. I'm going to make a commitment to do this. Measure it out. Is this worthwhile for me, or do I need to pursue something else that would benefit me in a whole nother level, right? Do I need to be working up the street from my house and riding a skateboard there instead of filling up at Costco, regardless of what the price of gas is, every other day, right? That's something that I need to look at. We need to look at, right? Because as we look at it, the word already speaks on how we should handle some things. Are we measuring up to that? Are we following that? Are we living that out? Or are we just saying, well, I read it, I think I'm doing something like that, but I'm going to go ahead and do my own thing? Are we doing the Christian gotcha thing where, Lord, I hear you, but I got to do this over here because this is what I'm feeling? How are we doing? How would Jesus rate us in our stewardship? How would Jesus rate us for that, right? He says, your heart will be where your treasure is. Look where you're spending. That's where you're invested. That's where you're spending. That's where you're spending your time. That's where you're spending your money, right? If 30% of your withdrawals are from when you're at the ATM at the casino, that's what 30% of your withdrawals are coming from, because that's where you're seeing your spending coming from. It's right there. It's right there in your bank account. I told you, look at your bank account and let your bank account tell you where you're spending your money, where you're spending most of your money, where you're spending most of your time. And if 30% of your withdrawals are from the casino ATM, it ain't lying to you. It's telling you the truth, right? And so where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. And so it says it in Luke also, right? And it says it in Matthew, right? In Luke, it says it a little differently. Just take it like this, right? That's what it says in Luke, right? Hey, sell your possessions and give to the poor. Get yourselves purses that will not wear out, the treasure in heaven that never runs out, where thieves can't steal and moths can't destroy. Your heart will be where your treasure is. Come on. That's just where you're spending your money. If you're spending all your money at the Gap or Adidas or Vans or whatever, then, that's where you're spending your money. But know that that's an indication where you don't have to continue like that if that's not what you want to do, if that's not your financial goal, if that's not how you feel God is blessing you to do so. You got a raise, you have to be careful of what they call lifestyle creep. You have to get a raise, and so that doesn't mean get more shoes, It doesn't mean get more clothes. What that might mean is increase the likelihood of you saving for retirement or having a better life now or expanding your family. Those types of things are what we have to look at. Be sure about it, but you can always talk to a professional about it. You can always go to someone else who knows more. You know what I mean? We can always get that professional advice from somewhere, and I think that's more so than just listening to us espouse things on YouTube. I'm just asking you to evaluate your stewardship as we wrap this up. These studies on stewardship, evaluate it and see where you stand and how you want to move forward with the things that God has blessed you with. Where do you currently stand, and where do you want to go forward with what God has blessed you with? Those are the two things I want you to get into play, right? And then from there, take that and say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what my plan is. Here's how I plan on proceeding. Here's what I need. Or say, hey, you know what? I need more information, and let me start looking down this pathway. They mentioned Dave Ramsey. Let me start looking at what Dave Ramsey says. They mentioned this. Let me start looking over here. Find what you need and find what fits, but make sure it works for you and how you plan to work your plan. Hey, next week we're starting something new. We'll be back 9 a.m. God bless. God be with you. Peace.